Hello, I'm Rosalind Esche of dearreader.blog. Welcome to our Crime Scene podcast, which focuses on crime fiction writers. Today, I'm in conversation with Emily Winslow, author of compelling psychological crime novels, written from multiple points of view. In this second part of our interview, I asked Emily how she keeps track of all the intricacies of her plots.
Do you have a daily writing routine?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm a big believer that there are phases to writing a book.
Okay.
And, sometimes you're doing more thinking than writing. I believe daydreaming is a huge part of writing work. And I'm always encouraging my students to count daydreaming as I worked today.
Staring out the window, yeah.
Yes, because I believe that is a completely necessary stage, and to denigrate yourself when you're doing that part of the development of your story, to say, oh, I'm so lazy, I'm so terrible, I just don't think that's healthy.
No.
And so recognizing that there is so much that goes into creating a book that isn't typing.
Yes.
I'm really on a crusade to encourage people to consider all the elements of the work that goes into a book and to be proud of themselves for all the different work that they accomplish throughout the creation of a book. So sometimes my work is a lot of typing, and sometimes it's a lot of thinking, and sometimes it's a lot of rereading it and revising, and there are just lots of different stages. Also, now my kids are older. My kids are 16 and 20 now. But when I started writing my first novel, my younger son was 6 months old, and my older son had just turned 5. And and we were homeschooling. So my life was a lot of childcare and then writing when you can.
Yeah.
And my husband, it was great that his work made it so that we could share the homeschooling equally. So I had writing slots set aside for me during the week, but I didn't always use them for writing because there's a transition, there's a ramping up to get into the writing brain.
Yes.
And so if he gave me 4 hours to write, I might spend 3 hours, idly reading things or watching something and thinking and daydreaming, and then I'd write for the last hour because I needed to use that time to get my brain into the right place. And I did beat myself up about that and wonder if I'm a lazy and terrible person, but I don't think I am. I think that's just how my brain works. And now I just respect it. And if I sit down to take 3 hours for that transition, that's what it takes. That's how I get my brain to do what it does.
Yes.
And that's allowed. I think curiosity about the world is just natural. So you just look at something, go, I wonder that, I wonder that. For example, in The Whole World, there's a setup where somebody is protecting their home and they put dishes on the stairs so that anybody who sneaks in through that door will slip and fall. And that's because I had little kids, and it really scared me walking up and down the stairs. I would think, what if somebody left something on the stairs? We could literally die. So it's just...
But only a writer would then create something out of that.
So it's just all these everyday things that you observe, and then you just, throw it in a book. Throw it in a book.
And you type. Do you never write by hand or use a dictaphone or anything?
Not so much. No, I think if I ever lost the power to type, and obviously in the old days I used to write by hand because computers weren't a thing when I was young. We handwrote all our homework. But I definitely write through my hands.
Okay.
And I have a different voice in my hands. I would find it very challenging to switch to dictating a book because my speaking voice is different from my typing voice.
That's really interesting. Wow.
I bet I could do it. I mean, people do recover and manage to switch brain connections and things, but it would be
but it's
very
a really different
hard
process for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you need to have everything plotted in your head before you even start a book?
Absolutely not. I sometimes do do events with Sophie Hannah, and she is an amazing planner. I once saw one of her outlines for the new Poirot book. It was 60 pages, the outline. And then she sits down and she writes what she planned to write, and that works amazingly for her. And when we do events, this question always comes up, and we're a nice contrast because I don't plan at all. I often don't even know who committed the crime or
Right, that's what I was wondering.
or what the amazing answer is going to be. I'm in the shoes of the detective and the others looking around going, I don't know what happened, but I'm determined to find out. And so I, along with them, am doing everything I can in the story to figure it out because I don't know it either.
Wow. And that doesn't make you feel apprehensive. You're just in the process.
Yeah.
And something happens along the way that makes you realize who it's going to be.
Well, I, like the detective, will figure it out.
So, how do you keep track of all the intricacies of your plots? Characters.
That's challenging. So I said I don't plan, and I don't plan beforehand. I don't write an outline beforehand, but I often write an outline at the midpoint.
Right.
To analyze what I've written.
Okay.
And it gives me a nice chart where I can say, these are the characters I'm dealing with. These are the different subplots they're enacting. These are the mysteries raised that still need an answer, that sort of thing. And I turn it all into some very intimidating, complex chart.
Yeah.
But it's very handy for me. So yes, I do need to outline, but I don't do it beforehand. I do it either at the midpoint or after I've finished a whole first draft, where I can see what have I really done. And what do I need to do to make this a satisfying book?
Do you have a way of, perhaps you don't need this, but of keeping track of details about recurring characters in case you make a mistake? Like
a story Bible. They do that sometimes when there's a project that's going to have multiple writers. They have a story Bible that you can refer to that tells you all those things.
A bit like a concordance sort of thing, where you remember, that person has blue eyes, and
right.
Just in case
I don't do that, and probably I should.
No, obviously you haven't ever made a mistake, so it doesn't matter.
I haven't been caught out in a mistake. Let's say that.
Do you seed clues into your plots for the readers so that they can try and work it out themselves? Or do you withhold information and misdirect them so that they can't work it out?
So this question, the way it's phrased, assumes that I have planned the answer.
And you've already told me you haven't.
So I don't. The way I like to describe it, because a lot of people are very skeptical that it's even possible to have a satisfying ending if you haven't planned it from the beginning.
Oh. Okay.
And the example I always bring up is let's imagine that in chapter 1, a character stumbles, knocks over an umbrella stand, and an umbrella falls behind the couch. And then in the last chapter, they're being cornered by the villain, and they're able to reach under the couch, pull out the umbrella, and defend themselves. Okay? And it could be that a planner was writing this book, and they knew they would need that umbrella in the last chapter, and so they deliberately set up that problem in Act 1, that clumsiness. Equally, if you were me, you had the clumsiness for some other reason entirely, trying to demonstrate something about their character or about a relationship or their reaction to a piece of news. And then in the end, when I, with my character, was cornered and trying to figure out how to defend from the villain, I just look around and I remember, there's an umbrella under the couch.
Right.
I guess it's like the difference between creationism and evolution. Was it all planned in advance and this was designed to be this way? Or is this just what happened, and each step along the way you just use what's there?
So it's a bit random, can be a bit chaotic, but
but ultimately the characters figure it out.
So as an American living in Cambridge, do you feel that coming from a different culture gives you a particular insight into life here, which then informs your work?
So one of the things that's nice about Cambridge is that it's inherently full of foreigners because of the university, and constantly refilled by new foreigners every year. So being a foreigner in Cambridge, in a way, makes you a Cambridgey person.
Yeah, it's almost the norm. Yeah,
So,
I get that. Yeah.
So I never feel like I don't belong here. I feel very much a Cambridge person. And before I came here, when I was trying to write a novel for years, setting was a real struggle for me, because if I tried to write about someplace I knew really well, I didn't have any perspective on it. I was so deep within it, I didn't know what to say about it. It was just the air I breathed. How could I, what would I say? There's either everything or nothing. And then when I came to Cambridge, on the one hand, it was completely different from any place else. So it was very obvious what I wanted to tell people about it. But it was also someplace I was living, so I had access to knowing about it deeply and experientially.
Yeah.
In a way that I wouldn't if I had just chosen a random place to write about that I didn't know anything. So that combination of having experience and knowing it really well, but at the same time it being new to me, was what enabled me to finally write a novel. I was simply not able to do it before then.
Oh, that's really interesting. So just the fact of being here enabled you to write.
It just triggered everything. Yeah.
Do you read other crime writers or avoid reading them?
I avoid reading books set in Cambridge.
Alison Booth said the same thing.
Yes. It's my terror is that if I read books set in Cambridge, either I'll inadvertently pick something up, or I'll be so afraid that I've inadvertently picked something up that I'll feel frozen in my own writing. So
you mean pick something up from that?
Like a description, a metaphor. Do you know what I mean? That I might inadvertently copy it or absorb it, you know. So I try to, when I try to write about Cambridge from life, from my experience, and avoid Cambridge writers.
Do you read other crime writers?
I do. I teach at Mattingly Hall.
I was going to ask you about Mattingly Hall.
Which is wonderful. So much of my reading is either reading things for the reading lists for the students, reading student work, and then, unrelated to the teaching, always reading my friends' manuscripts. I have a lot of writer friends, and we read each other's work and critique it for each other, help each other out. So my reading is almost always, when it comes to reading like published books, I'm always either reading them just before they come out because a friend wrote them, or I'm reading them way after the fact, like that bestseller came out 15 years ago, and I'm now reading it so that I can talk about it with my students, sort of thing. So I'm not on the cutting edge of what's currently in the bookstore.
You're a late adopter. So is most of your reading time used for research purposes for your books?
No. I did an absolute ton of research when I started. Research about Cambridge, research about Cambridge police, all that stuff. I spent a lot of time, and I have shelves of books on the topic. But now I know the foundational stuff enough that usually my research is more talking to people. And that's, in fact, one of the greatest things about writing novels, is that you get to email an expert and say, I'd like to know more about what you do. Could we meet up? And in Cambridge, most of the time people say yes. And they'll just explain to you how their job works. And you can even ask a question like, if you were going to commit a murder in this building, where would be a good place to do that? And people have great answers.
They've thought about that. That's worrying. Do they look askance at you? And are you talking to experts like forensic experts or pathologists or anybody like that?
It's been things like if my character's an astronomer and they're studying redshift.
Right. Okay.
What would that be like?
Right.
How is this an accurate description of what they do? What would their day be like? Who do you interact with in that capacity? That sort of thing. And one time I did send an email to a lock keeper out in the fens to say, if I wanted a body to wash up at point A, would point B be a reasonable place to put them in?
And was it?
And yes, it was. They were very helpful.
I trust you kind of introduced yourself
I
first.
do.
Otherwise, that would be a strange request. And have you spoken to actual police officers as well, and sort of been with police discussing their work?
I met with police twice. Once was when, so I wrote the first book without talking to police. And then working on the second book, where I was going to have the detectives in the police station.
Yeah. Is that the one where it all started?
That's the start of everything.
The start of everything.
Yes.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure where Major Crimes was and what that was like, because Major Crimes does not work out of Parkside.
No. Okay.
And so that was very helpful. The first time I went to the appointment to meet with that detective, or I'm not sure if he might have been chief of something. Anyway, I'm not sure of his exact title, but to meet with that person, I got there, and then I was told by the front desk that he was attending to a shooting. So I was like, okay, we will reschedule. And we did. So then I learned about where that where the Major Crimes detectives work.
Where do they work from?
I don't think I should say.
No,
it's actually secret.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
And I don't say in the book, but I'm able to describe it in a way that is appropriate. And then later, when, as you know, my detective Morris, he gets his hand injured in book 1, and there are ramifications to that in the books afterward.
Really interesting. Yeah.
And at one point, he leaves policing because he can't function as he was used to functioning. And then when I wanted to bring him back, in a different role. Because what you never want to do is just have it not matter that he left. No. I wanted it to transform.
That's in the Red House, isn't it, where he comes back? Yeah.
Well, the Red House,
he is coming
he decides to come back at the end of the Red House. And then he comes back for look for her.
Yeah, yeah.
And so a very kind detective came to my house to discuss what the options are for a police person who has had medical issues and wants to come back. But, how would that transform for them? So he was great. Really helpful. Very, very helpful.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
I'm probably quite intrigued to read your books as well afterwards and see how they feature. Okay, so you've kind of answered it. I was going to say, if and when you get the time, what do you read just for pleasure and relaxation?
I do a lot of puzzles still.
Right.
Games Magazine that you mentioned, which I was reading since it came into existence in the mid-'70s. Or maybe late 70s. I was been reading it since I was 9 or 10, because my dad subscribed, and I still have a subscription, and it's still at my place at the dining room table. So puzzles are a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
At-home escape rooms are a big part of my life. That sort of thing. So I love. Yeah, that's where a lot of my reading is right now, is interactive experiences.
Do you think you have a particular kind of brain to do that kind of thing? Are you spatially really, I don't know, sharp? Do you have a mathematical brain? I mean,
I think it's probably a mathematical brain. It has become less mathematical as I've gotten older.
Right.
It turns out I have difficulty solving some of the puzzles I wrote when I was younger.
Oh, that's wonderful. Don't you have the solutions locked away somewhere?
I do. I have them, but I shouldn't need them.
That will make you more sympathetic to the people trying to do them. Perhaps.
What's quite fun, though, is my husband is also good at puzzles. And when we're working together, and my sons as well, so when we ask each other for help, instead of just giving each other the answer like, oh, that word is blah, we give each other hints. And the boys have become very good at that as well. So if I get stuck, I can ask my son, would you look up the answer and then hint me? You know what I mean? Give me a nudge instead of giving it away. And so it's a very social and interactive experience.
Do you find that time delay thing I get with crosswords, where you simply can't see it, like you said earlier?
Yes.
But then if you go away for an hour or so, come back, it's just there.
It appears.
As if your brain has been processing it subconsciously.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying about daydreaming and writing, is sometimes the dough needs to rise. Yeah. And you're not being a lazy baker if you let the dough rise.
And you mustn't actually stress and try and force it.
Exactly.
It works better if you just leave it.
Exactly.
It's a fascinating process, isn't it?
Completely.
Wow, that's really interesting about your puzzles. I love that you can't do some of them yourself.
Oh, it's very embarrassing.
I bet your sons laugh at you for that.
Thank you for listening to part 2 of our interview with Emily Winslow. Look out for other interviews